This is Real Housewives of the Kingdom, a sweet space where you'll hear from the hearts of fellow housewives in the kingdom of God, some just like you and some really different in various walks of life. We will talk about how God is walking with us through the good and the hard. I pray you'll be encouraged and entertained as we laugh and sometimes cry together. Most of all, I hope it reminds you we're in this together and you are not alone. Today, I'm chatting with my sweet longtime friend, Mica Kucera. She is a wife and a mama and loves the Lord. Today, we are talking about the Enneagram and how God can use it to speak to our hearts and help us to grow and be more like Him. Mica has a thriving Enneagram online community and has recently written a book about using the Enneagram, essential oils, and reflexology to help you work through emotions and grow. She's clearing up some common misconceptions and talking about how the Enneagram can be a great tool in your marriage and parenting. Whether you are an Enneagram aficionado, have never heard of it, or are somewhere in between, I think you will love our conversation. Hey everybody, I would like you to welcome my sweet friend, Mica Kucera. She has been my friend for a really long time, since we were, I would say like 7. Don't you think we were like 6, 7, something like that? Yeah, a long time. So we went to church together, and she now lives in the Pacific Northwest, and I'm here in LA, which is why we are on Zoom. But she is delving into all things Enneagram today. And she also is writing a book, which we're going to talk about. And she does essential oils and kind of mixes the cool things with essential oils and Enneagram, which is also really cool. So we're going to kind of talk about all of those things. So, but I'm going to let her kind of introduce herself and talk about the things that, who she is, and let her introduce herself. So go ahead.
Thank you, friends. So again, my name is Mica Kucera, and I am a mama. I got my little one with me because she's
Yay.
6 months old, and she just needs mom all the time right now. I have a husband. We have been married, gosh, it'll be 15 years in December.
Yay.
And we met in college, and then he joined the Army, and that is what moved us from California up to the Pacific Northwest. And I have a 4-year-old boy, and then with a really fun story, we've a lot of infertility and embryo adoption, and that's a whole other podcast.
Yeah, it's really amazing.
Yeah, I also have a 5-month-old little girl. So, yeah, I also have been walking with Jesus. Again, grew up as a believer, grew up in the church, but then, accepted Jesus when I was probably 5 or 6. And then really remember when I don't remember the exact age, but somewhere around like 14, 15, 16, I actually, growing up, Caroline, and I, going to church in Redlands, and I remember specifically driving past Mr. J's, which was the donut shop we always stopped at.
Yes.
I remember watching, like driving past it and thinking, I don't have to pray the prayer anymore. Like I just know. I finally know. Other than like every time they did an altar call praying, because I was like, well, I don't know, you know. So
Did I do it? Did it take?
and I just had that aha moment. So yeah, that is a gist of who I am, and yeah.
That's awesome. Well, and one of the memories that I have too is that, well, when we were both homeschooled, and on women's Bible study days, our moms both went to women's Bible study together. Our moms were friends or our friends. And we got to go because we were homeschooled. So, we did our school at different times and we would go to women's Bible study. But Mike and I really loved worship. And so we would sit in the back of the women's Bible study because we just wanted to worship together, and we would dance and worship. And it was just, I don't know, it's such a sweet memory. That's such a sweet memory to me. And I love that we've been friends for so long. And even though we don't see each other all the time, it's just so sweet to have had that faith bond that we both have for so long. So I'm so excited that you're on the show and that we're talking today. This is so cool.
Love it.
So we're going to start talking about the Enneagram. And I know a lot about the Enneagram. I don't know how many listeners do, so I was hoping maybe you could just give a little bit of an overview of the Enneagram, and just so that if people have never heard about it, what it is.
Yeah, so the Enneagram is a personality typing tool, right?
Mhm.
Um, like similar to like Myers-Briggs, or I know in my circle I've seen a lot of like the color personality tool, or like the animal, like you're a golden retriever. Um,
I
fun.
haven't heard that one.
There's a lot of fun ones out there. Um, I do. One of the reasons I love the Enneagram though is it does like help you get to know yourself, but it also gives you a growth path. And that's been my favorite thing, because all the other ones I felt like the color one, I was like, ooh, I'm a yellow, I'm a people person. Okay, what does that do for me? Right? Like
Yeah.
really take me anywhere. And so the Enneagram is a personality tool that gives you a path to grow. And so it's numbers 1 through 9. They all
Mhm.
have different names depending on who it is under. But basically, you would like, for me, I am a 7. And then there's a whole lot of depth and detail to it. So then you can get more detailed of like, I'm a 7-winged 6. And then, okay, well, subtype. Okay, well, I'm the 1-to-1 subtype. So there's so much to it, but the basics of it is it's a number that describes your personality, and it describes both the really cool stuff and the really hard stuff. A growth path to where you basically can know how, well, how can I change, right? Like, and I
Mhm.
feel like as believers, that's the whole goal, right? We want to look more like Christ. We want to, oh, yes, thank you. We want to shed the personality, the sinful personality, and look more like Christ, right?
Mhm.
So, yeah, that's kind of the overview of the Enneagram.
That's awesome. And I am an Enneagram 9, which is the Peacemaker. So, and I know my battle with my number is that I have a tendency to want to keep the peace over helping make peace,
Yes.
because that's something that is like, you just want to just everybody just stop so that it's all peaceful. But realistically, for me, I know as a 9, I can kind of like, I actually do have the tools to help people see another person's point of view if I so choose to step out of my comfort zone and use those tools. So it's kind of, that's kind of like what she's talking about, that you can be in the, you can be in your kind of negative space in that number, or there's a really positive about that number too. So it's such a cool tool. Thank you for giving us the details on that. And you have an Enneagram group on Facebook that you've been doing. It's been a little over a year. Has it been a year yet?
It's actually been, in a couple months, it'll be 2 years.
2 years. Okay, awesome. Yeah. And have you started you're doing another kind of platform as well with the Enneagram, correct?
I am currently combining the two of those.
Mhm.
And so by the time this airs, it will be done, combined, and it'll be out.
Woohoo! We will definitely link that in the show notes. But her Enneagram group is really cool because and I'm part of it. But you go on and she posts different things, and it opens up great conversation, and it kind of helps you learn about the Enneagram and learn different things that you didn't know. You might not know about it, and it applies it to real life situations, which helps you to really understand what that means, so that you can grow, which is really, really cool. Now you are writing a book as well about the Enneagram. And where are you at in that book as far as publishing and things like that?
That's a great question. So it's Enneagram and essential oils, but more so it is, you can actually, even if you don't use essential oils, you can use it, because you can, it's all about releasing negative emotions. So like, for instance, if you take the emotion, I'm just gonna give a little overview, just real briefly.
Awesome. Please
Uh,
do.
if you take the emotion of sadness, there's a
Mm-hmm.
specific alarm point on your body,
Mm-hmm.
um, where you can release that emotion if you press the acupressure point.
Mm-hmm.
Also, if you, this is real life, right?
It
Um,
is. It's awesome. We love it. We love her little voice being part of it too.
oh, sister. Um,
Mhm.
so if you press that point, let's just feed her. Okay, good. If you press that point, for sadness, it helps release that emotion. Thank you. We're going to hand her off to Dad. And now she's happy. Okay. So let's refocus. So
you have the emotion sadness, and you have a particular pressure point that you can push on your body that will release that emotion.
And so you can do that on your own without oils, but you can also do it with oils, and it just specific oils help release that because it just raises the frequency, because a negative emotion has a really low frequency. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
How I added the Enneagram in is I pulled a whole ton of people and said, okay, as an Enneagram 9, if you were to take the emotion of sadness and release it, what would be the positive statement you would say to release it, right? So as an Enneagram 7, I'm super happy-go-lucky. And sadness is actually the worst example because it was basically split half and half. Half the Enneagram numbers said happy, and the other half said joyful, like I am happy, I am joyful.
Uh-huh.
So that's actually a horrible example. But for different ones like anger, as an Enneagram 9, the thing that you need to replace anger is going to be different for me as an Enneagram 7, right?
Okay.
And so that's how I combined it, is I gave everyone per their Enneagram number basically an I am statement to say, okay, instead of being angry, I want to, like, and for me as a believer, pray over myself, right? Of I am calm, right? And so that is the gist of the book. And the process right now, the woman who did all the research, she's given me permission. I just have to put a couple of tweaks in, send it back to her. She'll then give me the written consent, and then it goes to the publisher. So my prayer is that, again, by the time that this airs, that it will be at the publisher and I will know a publishing date.
Yee, that would be awesome. That would be awesome. That's so awesome. And so it's going to a publisher, you're not self-publishing.
Correct.
Awesome.
Unless this publisher says, nope, this isn't going to be a thing, then I will then self-publish.
Right. Or maybe shop it around to different publishers. Or
God's got that all.
I've heard a little bit. I mean, I don't know a ton about it, but I've heard some people interviewed on podcasts actually about publishing, and it's a pretty wild like world, and I didn't realize how much went into, even people that we know who've written books that have sold, billions of copies. You hear how they shopped it around to 20 publishers before that book was even published, and you're like, oh my gosh, that's crazy. So that is awesome. We will definitely be praying for that. Christians have a tendency. So I love the Enneagram, and I think it's an awesome tool, and I really see the benefit of using it as a Christian. I heard a podcast about the Enneagram years ago with my husband, and they talked about how Jesus was the best of all the numbers. So his personality was all the best of the numbers. And so that really intrigued me and made me feel like that's a really cool way to look at it. And that he does give us what we need to be able to combat those negative things. But Christians are still uneasy about it. I don't know. I think they think it's like a pentagram or something, like a witchcraft thing. And so what would you say to just kind of further ease people's minds that it's not some weird thing that is not biblical or biblically based, or maybe how you might use it that wouldn't be biblically based?
Right. I actually just had this conversation with a friend a couple weeks ago who also teaches the Enneagram. And so it was really fun for her and I to kind of like go back and forth. And we had basically the same answer. And the answer is this: God can use anything, right? And so, no, we're not going to go out and intentionally find something that's occult or mystic or something like that and start using that and being like, well, I'm praying to Jesus, right? Like that's not, we're not doing that. The Enneagram is literally just a personality tool. And if you're really curious, you can just, I know it sounds really weird, but Wikipedia has a really excellent description of how, like, who kind of did a lot of the work. And there's multiple names, right? It's not just one person created or anything like that, but there were.
I heard that there were like monks.
Yes, I was like going to say they were
started it.
Not Jewish. I can't remember the word, but yes, basically a bunch of monks also really took it in and started using it.
And this wasn't in recent years. This was
No.
hundreds of years ago, as far as I know.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. And this what I say is we can use it as a way to make it very me focused, right? But
Mhm.
that's not of God. And so to me, the way I teach it and what I am like, okay, this is what I want for you,
Mhm.
is look at it in the sense of like, okay, so this is who God created me to be, but then my sin nature took over, right? I live in a
Mhm.
fallen world. And so that's why all these negative aspects of my personality came out to try to cope with living in a
Mhm.
fallen world. And so ultimately, and that's what our goal without the Enneagram, that's our goal as believers is to let go of our sinful nature and look more like Christ, right? Take on all the fruits of
Mhm.
the Spirit, take on all those things. And so that's basically to the Enneagram. It just points out in a radically beautiful way things that I just had no idea. I was always just like, I couldn't even pinpoint, oh, those are part of my personality. It was more of just
Right.
like,
I remember when I first did it. So the first time I ever heard of it, my sister heard a pastor do a teaching series on it and sent it to me, was like, listen to this. And I listened to his teaching on each of the numbers, and it was actually really cool because he went and he linked each number to a person in the Bible, which was like incredible. Um, and so I thought that was really cool. When I took the test to see what I was, I it just floored me as I was reading it. It felt as if somebody was inside of me and knew. I couldn't even believe it. Just I don't know, just before I started delving into the Enneagram, not that I didn't work on things and pray for God to work on things that I knew I struggled with, but this almost helped compartmentalize it in a way that was easier to address.
100%. I would say yes.
Yeah. It's
That is
so
exactly right on of how I feel similar.
it's so so cool. Um and one of the things that I've heard people say is that the that it boxes you, that people use it as a box to say, well, this is just how I am. Well, I'm a 8, for instance, for those who don't know. So an 8 is known as a challenger, and that's not a bad thing. Challengers can be good too, even though it's a more intense personality per se. But when used for good, it's really good. But someone could conceivably, as an 8, say, well, I'm just an 8, sorry, that's just how I am. And they could kind of approach somebody in a really uncouth and mean way and then just sit in that, well, I'm an 8, so that's just how I am. And in this, like, I could say, well, I'm a 9, and I don't like conflict, so I don't want to talk about this. And my husband's a 7 like you, and so he could go, there's no cares in the world. Let's go out to another movie. Let's go and do something fun. Let's not talk about this. Let's go do something fun. you know. So I think, and that's hard because I think people think it that is what it does. And I think that's where some Christians that I've had conversations with recently almost feel like it's a negative because they ran into somebody who was using it like that, who was using it incorrectly.
Mhm. I love that actually. And I love that you brought up an 8 because I have a really good friend who's an 8 and
Yeah.
also as a 7. I don't do conflict.
Yeah.
I shouldn't say that. I should change my words. I have to do conflict better when God's calling me to it, right? I
Mhm.
still have a rock in my stomach when it happens, but this is what's been really cool about learning about the Enneagram because knowing my friend is an 8, she doesn't want me to beat around the bush, right? And so
Mhm.
like, hey Micah, can we put a play date on the schedule? And I literally messaged her one day and I was like, you know what? I know this sounds ridiculous, but I'm completely overwhelmed today. Can you just text me tomorrow and we can do it tomorrow? Which sounds silly to anyone listening, I'm sure, But to me, I was so overwhelmed with everything that I had to do. The thought of putting one more thing on my schedule,
Was
but
too
instead of
much.
ignoring it and potentially forgetting about this text conversation for days, because we all do that, right? We look at a text,
Mm-hmm.
I'll get back to that later, and we don't.
Yep.
Um, she just laughed and said, "Yes, I'll text you tomorrow." Right. But she's so forthright that that's all she needs to know. She may think I'm ridiculous, but I know she's like totally fine. Likewise, if she's like, "Micah, can you do, I don't know, can you serve on this committee?" And I, instead of being like, well, and like beating around the bush to like make her feel like, like come up with these sweet words to say no, I can just be like, nope, don't have capacity. But that's not rude to her, right? Like that's what she,
Mm-hmm.
that forthright.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and she and I have had good conversations. Circling back around to your question, she and I have had really good conversations about um, what it looks like to not be boxed in, right? Of
Mm-hmm.
her being able to be like, well, why do people keep doing this? Because eights are also super vulnerable deep inside and super loyal. So once you're friends with them, they're like, you're my person forever. And so when
Mm-hmm.
she does something to offend someone and they drop her because they're like, I just can't be
Ooh.
friends with her anymore, she's devastated, but they don't know it. They're like, she doesn't have feelings. She's an eight. She's just like, whatever. And so she and I had a lot of growth conversations surrounding that, um, because she's like, well, how do I change? How do I not change who I am? Because that's not the thing of like, she doesn't want to become a seven or become a nine, but how do
Mm-hmm.
I approach people in that manner to where I'm not using it as an excuse, but
Mm-hmm.
growing in that so that if I have a friendship later on who does that, I can have a conversation, and grow and learn
Yeah.
from it. So,
Well, and one of the things when my hubby and I were listening to stuff on the Enneagram that we really kind of likened it to was the love languages. Um, we did the love languages, I don't know, a few years into being married, and thought it was fantastic because the concept that somebody somebody feels loved a different way than you give love is just mind blowing. First of all, I mean, I guess it shouldn't be mind blowing, but it just opens up your eyes to, oh, they're actually not feeling love from me. And I feel like this is how we can also use with the Enneagram to know, like you were saying with your friend who's an eight, if she doesn't feel, she would rather you be direct with her and say, no, I can't do it that day, I don't want to do it that day, but I would rather do it tomorrow.
right.
Or she'd rather you be direct than beat around the bush. But if you hadn't really studied that or noticed that that was her personality, you would never have been able to know that you might be hurting her or pushing her further away. But because of the Enneagram, you're able to actually have a closer conversation, which is, or closer relationship, which is incredible.
Yeah, I feel like it allows you to understand other people way better, right?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, me too. And so you said that with book writing, so you have somebody who did the research, but you're writing the bulk of the book.
Yep, I completely, essentially this woman, she did an incredible job and she wrote her own book, which was like 400 plus emotions. And I was like,
Wow.
this is incredible, but I never use it because it's so like you have to go to like 4 or 5 different pages.
Oh,
And so it
yeah.
was just really hard. Like, I want it, how can I make this simple? So I called her a couple of years ago and I said, hey, I have this idea. Do I have your permission? Because it's your research. Like, I'm going to give you
Mhm.
credit. Her name's Dr. Mine, Dr. Carolyn Mine. And she said,
Mhm.
that is a lovely idea. Yes, go for it. And I cried because I was like, oh my gosh, she's like giving me permission right now. So I wrote it, got pregnant, refined it over my pregnancy, and then it was finally ready to go in January. And I called her again and I said, okay, here it is. Um, and she looked it over and basically said, it's great. I just want you to change these 3 things and then it's ready to go.
That's
So,
awesome. That's
yeah,
awesome. And I bet it was so helpful with your online community. How many people do you have in your online community?
I mean, between Facebook and Enneagram, probably a couple thousand.
And it's so cool because you kind of, as she's posing questions online and putting different things out there, it really makes you think. And then you're seeing other people comment, which I think is cool because it kind of goes back to that not boxing yourself in and really understanding other people's emotions. Um, and I just want to touch really quick on wings as well. So, and I don't know, maybe this is broaching too much, but there's the numbers, but then there are there was wings. So it's the number that's on either side of your number that you kind of also lean towards. So I don't know if you want to explain that a little, because if people have like researched it a little bit, they might start to get overwhelmed by that concept.
I love that question because I can't tell you how many people say, Micah, I'm a two wing eight. And I'm like, that's not possible. So that's a good question. So yes, so like as a seven, the numbers on either side are a six or an eight. As a nine, we just have to be really close. Your
Mhm.
numbers are eight and one because nine circles back around to one and then you just keep circling.
Mhm.
So you can only, like for me, I can only be a seven wing six or a seven wing eight. And it can actually change. You can actually just be a seven. But what that introduces, because literally there's how many billions of people on earth, right?
Mhm.
So like just nine personality types is we're just all so different.
Mhm.
But basically you're borrowing characteristics or personality traits from each of those numbers. So for me in
Mhm.
everyday life, I'm a seven wing six, which
Mhm.
means I'm super loyal and borrowing those traits of my six wing. But in work, I'm actually a seven wing eight. Because
Mhm.
it's a little bit easier for me to be more of that, like, no, I actually know what I'm talking about and I'm solid in this versus trying to kind of appease people in my personal life of like, well, I don't
Mhm.
want to like, make conflict and stuff there. So I'm just going to be like, okay, it's fine. Right.
That's really interesting. And, I don't know if everybody who's started researching the Enneagram or has heard of it realizes that in different situations, and I've even seen that my husband, who's a seven, he would say he was seven wing six as well, and say he wasn't an eight at all. But he actually, when needed, he is a defender of people.
Mm.
And if you if you cut him off on the freeway or do something that's against the law, you cut over two double yellows, whatever, come into your lane, I mean, that is not okay. And if he could have a conversation with them, he would tell them why it's not okay, and he would have no problem approaching that. Or if he's having even a conversation with someone at a store and they've done something, the store has done something that's not correct, he doesn't have any problems coming in and saying, I'm sorry, but this was your policy and you can't, but he would have never. And I pointed it out to him recently, that I was like, I think you actually have a little eight in you. And he was like, I do? Yeah, I
That's so
think you
fun.
do. Yeah.
Well, for you to be able to have a tool to have a way to describe it to him that he understands.
Mhm.
Right? So it's now giving you guys language to be able to describe parts of yourself that you both understand, right?
Mm-hmm. Definitely. And that kind of actually moves me into my next question, Enneagram with marriage and mothering. And what tools have you found within both of those aspects?
I love that. So you guys are a seven and a nine, guy seven, girl nine. We are actually opposite. I'm a seven and my husband's a nine. We were actually originally mistyped, which means when I first took the test, I thought I was a nine and my husband was a seven. And it wasn't until
Mhm.
a friend of mine was like, I don't think that's true. Keep looking, right? Keep diving deeper into that. When I, again, like you said earlier, when I read about the seven, I just had this like, oh, someone knows me well. How did they write this chapter about me? Because I read the Peacemaker and I was like, I resonate with a lot of that. But when I
Mhm.
read the seven, I was like, oh my word, that is. So what it's helped in our marriage, um, it's helped me realize, which actually goes into the parenting as well, that when you have a peacemaker and someone who just wants to have fun together, you just want to avoid conflict and hard
Mhm.
things. And so that is something that um, we've had some stuff in our marriage. And when I look back at it, I realize even now that I'm like, I'm not sure we actually did
Dealt with it.
dealt with it. Yeah. Like
Hmm.
we did a good job of like, it doesn't come up every day. It doesn't do that. Like I feel like we worked on it well.
Hmm.
I don't think we fully dealt with it and fully like let it go. And so
Hmm.
there's even now I'm like, I think we may need to revisit those really hard things one day, which everything
Hmm.
is like, oh, why would you do that?
Yeah.
For me, it's also like that's full health, right? Full health of being like, okay, Jesus, I need to circle back around and do this. And the same thing, that's actually one of the reasons um, I got into the Enneagram was because I was having a really hard time parenting. And
Mm.
I mean, raw and real, there was one moment where I had lifted my 2-year-old and I was literally screaming in his face because
Mm.
generational stuff, right? When you learn certain
Yeah.
behaviors of parenting. And I just remember as I'm yelling at him, like looking at his face, being like, what am I doing? What is
Mm.
wrong with me in this moment?
Yeah.
Uh, and I got a really good parenting course that I adore and recommend 100%, Love and Logic. But also, that's when the Enneagram came into place. And I recognized, like, okay, I have not dealt with a lot
Mm.
of stuff, and anger is just like coming up in me.
Mm.
And that was kind of and the way I had described it was when my friend who was like, I don't think you're a nine. She's described something about emotions, and I was like, oh yeah, hard emotions. I just like tuck them in a box and like put them behind me. Like, who wants to, who
Yeah.
wants to deal with that? And she goes, oh, you're a seven. And I was like, oh, okay. Um, and so, and as I dived into that, I was like, okay, yeah, that is in mothering what been one of the biggest things that has really been beneficial is realizing like, okay, I don't deal with hard emotions and I can see when I'm not dealing with it and I'm getting stressed, I can see when
Mhm.
the lid is about to blow.
Mhm.
I'm like, okay, this is when I need to recognize like, okay, what's going on the inside? Where am I stressed?
Like a red flag.
Yeah,
Mhm.
exactly. And then that allows me to deal with my stuff so that I
Mhm.
can come back down and not basically explode at my family.
Yeah. Yeah. The it's so interesting because I think it helped. We've had decent communication. I mean, there were things we didn't communicate about at first. I had my episode 3, I interviewed my neighbor who was a financial coach for a little while, and they paid off a bunch of debt. And we were talking about that money with marriage. And that was one of the things that we just never discussed when we got married. We
Mm-hmm.
just didn't discuss it. And I thought, oh, well, the man does the money and I'm just not going to worry about it. I mean, that's just what I thought. And it's weird because my mom always did our bills. So I don't know why I thought that. But, but eventually we realized he hates doing it and I don't mind it. But we had to go through a lot before we got to that point.
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting because I think even if you haven't completely delved into all of the emotions or all of a certain topic that maybe you haven't finished working out in your marriage, I think it's okay. I think God, we grow and change as people. And, over the years and over our marriages and even just what's going on in our lives changes how we perceive things and how we're able to handle things better. And we mature. And so then sometimes we're able to have more mature conversations about things as we get older and have had more time married. But I feel like the Enneagram for us, just even sitting down and listening to a podcast series about each number and then us discussing it together opened up communication that I don't know that we would have discussed those specific things. And it also helped me to have more grace
Mm-hmm.
with my husband. I know when I see things and go, oh, I understand why he's responding like this right now. So I could probably respond a little better by doing this. And then maybe we can discuss it in a little bit. And of course, that also is the Lord too. I feel like the Holy Spirit is so necessity for like communication and helping when you need to discuss things.
Yeah, and recognizing, because that was something I learned early on in life. Like my husband, and I don't. This would be interesting. You as an Enneagram 9, it's the same. I can't just say, "Hey Thomas, should we like for a big thing, right?" Like I can be like, "Should we get milk instead of chocolate milk?" Right? Like that's an easy situation. But if I'm doing something big, sometimes even as big as like, or as small but big as like, hey, on Saturday, do you want to go for a hike? I need to give him days to think about it. If that
Mhm.
morning I was like, hey, let's go for a hike, and he was like, I was really planning on cleaning up the garage, it just throws him, right? And
Yeah.
he cannot, like, he's like, no, I need days. So, but he could never put those words to it. It was just something that I recognized over time. If there's a big something, I need to give him days to process. So,
Yeah. Well, and I don't necessarily need days, but I do recognize that my husband loves spur of the moment things. That just he thrives on that. And I think what we've learned to do now is I give in on some of his spur of the moment stuff, but then he recognizes when I might not be in a space to be able to do that as well. And so we've kind of learned to give and take, because I will plan in my head. I am very comforted by routine. And so, if I've even in my head thought, okay, we're going to wake up and we're going to have our coffee and we're going to read the Bible and then we're going to do this and then we're going to do that. And then if he's says, oh, let's run to the store really quick before we do this thing. It's like, wait,
yes.
I, I mean, I guess we could do that. I, I don't see why not, but I just really wasn't prepared. So I totally understand that feeling of like, wait, that wasn't the schedule. That wasn't the plan. Hold on. What are we doing?
Like, yeah, so we're going to leave in about 15 minutes, right? And I'm like, oh gosh, you just put a timeline on me and I feel stressful.
Yeah,
That
it's
communication.
funny. Like it, and so I'll have to look at my phone. I can't remember how many years it was ago. We were up near their house and we all got to have dinner. It was before your babies. Or you were you no, you weren't pregnant yet.
It would probably be 5 or 6 years ago.
Yeah. And we all got together and hung out, but I don't think any of us knew about the Enneagram at the time. So it's kind of interesting that we all like hung out together and same numbers.
Yep.
And then what would you say about, because I've heard this, and I'd be interested to know your opinion, not numbering your kids, not typing your kids.
So one of the things, so here we go, being an Enneagram 7, right? Like one of the things that God has gifted me with is being a visionary, right? If you were to start talking to me about like all of your hopes and dreams, I could go far beyond what you said and be like, okay, this is the business you need to do. And then you can do this with it, and then this, it's, and it just goes, phew. But it is the same thing for me, right? Like I get an idea and I'm like, yes, okay, let's run with this. I literally have a notebook full of ideas that I'm like,
Uh-huh.
someday, whenever those happen, right? One of them is doing some type of class. And I don't know if it's just going to be like a couple-hour class or if it's going to be like a days or weeks or whatever. But I want to do something for parents to recognize things within their kids, but not to type it. So for me, and I keep wanting to do this and just haven't done it. So maybe I'll get it done by the time this airs. So you guys will have it. But I
Yay.
want to create some type of like um, not necessarily I am statement, but encouraging statement for parents to
Mhm.
pray over their children for all
Mhm.
Enneagram types. So that no matter
Mm.
what Enneagram type your child is, you're saying in this prayer, and I'm totally getting like Holy Spirit goosebumps. So,
Mhm.
you're saying in this prayer something that no matter what will hit their soul, no matter what Enneagram,
Mm.
you know?
Mm. I
So
love that.
truth we can speak over our children according to God's word, that is still very much so hitting every of the 9 types so that they, whether you pray it over it every night or whenever you do it, like they're consistently, they may tune out the 9 and the 1 and the this and the that, but they're going to hear, like if they're a 2, they're going to hear that part about being a
Mhm.
helper and whatever. So, but it's one of those things that God's been putting on my heart. And so now you've just given me a deadline, which for this Enneagram 7, I need. So,
Sweet. I love it. That's awesome. Well, and I think, I understand why to say not to type because as a parent, you could put them in a box that they feel like they have to stay. Like, I've heard parents say, oh, well, they're just a homebody. They're just a homebody, and when a kid hears that on constant, or, oh, they're my hard one, oh, they're my hard one, they're my hard one. And when kids start hearing, oh, that's who I am, that's who I am, it really kind of boxes them. Or, oh, well, you're my helper girl. And it's okay to say, wow, you are so helpful. Thank you for helping me. But when you put that on them, sometimes it takes them a little longer to find where their strengths actually lie, because they're trying to live within what their parent put over them.
I didn't answer your question, I realized as you started talking. Yes, that I actually just wrote a post about this the other day where I try really hard to not, and we actually are just in our family practicing because my son's all about saying silly things, but calling people names of like, oh, you're silly, you're a monster, you're what, but in like a silly manner. And I was like, okay, let's change our words to say you're being. And so this is the
Oh, yeah.
that I wrote about. It's exactly what you're saying, Caroline, of I don't want to label him as a helper. I want to say you're being helpful. You're
Mhm.
um, be as an eight. You're being assertive rather than you're so
Mhm.
assertive right now, right? Um, and so just I feel like that's one way we can really help our children is even if we recognize their number, because it's actually a really positive thing because we can say, okay, where are they going to have challenges, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
But just changing our language to where and I actually, what I posted about was saying the fruits of the spirit, right? Because
Mm.
that's ultimately what we want our children to be. So instead of just being like, oh, you're being good, which for an
Mm.
Enneagram one, they want to hear that, right? They want to be
Yep.
good. Saying you're being kind or you're being
Mhm.
peaceful or patient. And it's hard because joyful is one of the fruits of the spirit. And so I'm like,
Yeah.
oh, I kind of like, because sevens are joyful.
Yep.
Being able to pour that on them and just be intentional with words and say you're being instead of you are.
Well, because it can go on the positive or the negative side when you identify as a particular thing, or when you identify someone as a particular thing. It could be great, but it could also be difficult. It could be like a negative that then they live in that negativity. So that's really awesome. And I love the fruits of the spirit thing, because it's funny, because I think some people get it mixed up that the fruits of the spirit are something that we strive for, but it's something that happens as we're walking with Jesus and experiencing his love and his joy and getting to know him. Those are the things that come spilling out of us when we are in balance and in time with him, and that kind of gave me, because I think so I'm a wing one, so I do like to, I like to be good. I like all of those things. And for me, that was always something that I would strive for is, okay, I want to be the fruits of the spirit. I want to try and be the fruits of the spirit. And recently the Lord has really just been opening that up in my heart. Like, no, you don't, just don't strive for it. It's not works. It will come through you as you're walking with me,
Mm-hmm.
which is cool if you're doing that with your kids. I mean, realistically, you could even do it in your marriage, noticing those kinds of things and calling those things out in your spouse is a great idea.
I think that's so true. I love that.
And so other than that, do you have any other advice or wisdom in that area as far as finding a number? I mean, I don't know. My husband was really open to finding his Enneagram number with me and kind of delving into it. But I've also talked to friends whose spouses are like, I'm not doing that.
Yeah, even my husband, it took us a 2-hour car ride down to a camping trip for me to go through Ian Crone's The Road Back to You book and literally reading 20 questions in front of each chapter describing each of
Mhm.
the types. And I went through and I read and got a yes or no for everyone. And because he, as a nine, was like, I don't know, I'm all of them. I was like, that's what makes you a nine.
And
Um,
we'll link. So Micah made a Enneagram quiz, so we'll definitely link that. So if you want to go on and find your number, you can do that through her quiz. It's really good. I took it and it was spot on.
I love that.
Good job, friend.
I thank you. I would even love if you're having a hard time figuring it out. I love part of my favorite part of this journey is walking with people to
Mm.
really even on the really hard ones. There's a couple of people that it's been really hard, but to me, just to walk back and forth and talk through things to help you figure it out. Once you figure it out, that aha moment, I'm like, yes, victory.
We figured it out.
That's fine. So if you are struggling figuring it out too, and you take my quiz and you're like, that doesn't feel like me, reach out to me because I want to walk through it with you to help you figure it out.
That's
So
awesome. I and I think we already kind of touched on kind of your big discoveries of your number when you found your number. And then, we say don't type your kids, and don't type other people. That's another common thing that Enneagram people say, don't type other people, but it is hard. It is so hard not to type other people.
it's really hard not to, but the most difficult person that we finally figured it out, we probably went through five people, five different numbers before we figured out her number.
Wow.
Um, and here's the thing is we don't know the core motivator inside someone. So we could just see them. This is super tangent, but, or not tangent, but way more explanation. But you have your wings, but then you also have the number that you go to and you borrow characteristics from when you're growth at your best, but
Mm-hmm.
also when you're stressed at your worst. So sometimes we might see someone when they're at their worst and assume they're that number when
Mm.
that's not their core. We just don't know their core. And
Well, and
so,
explain a little bit better the motivation thing because that's really important with the Enneagram,
yeah.
through
So
core motivation.
my quiz being a prime example, every quiz you'll take is going to look at your personality like characteristics, but
Mm-hmm.
how you know your number is what you're motivated at your core, right? So for me, I'm motivated by adventure, having fun, and not dealing with hard stuff, right? Like that's what I'm motivated by. Um, but some of my characteristics can look different and they can look similar to other ones. Likewise, Carolina's a peacemaker. Um, you're motivated by keeping the peace, and sometimes
Mm-hmm.
at the expense of your own desires or wants not
Yes.
being seen, right?
Mm-hmm. It's more important often for me to keep the peace, and I don't need to. I'm fine. I don't care. I don't. Going out to eat is a good example for me. For that, for nine, a lot of nines I talk to are similar. Um, you might say, your spouse might say, oh, do you want to go out to eat? And they say, where do you want to go? And you say, oh, I don't know, maybe here. And you throw something out. And if they say, oh, could we go here instead? Sure, whatever,
Totally fine.
fine. And not to say that that's not a bad thing, because you don't want to be selfish 100% of the time, but it is difficult and you have to be really present to remember. And I think what I try to do is make sure that I'm not, make sure that it's something that I really want and it's not something that I'm just picking at random. I think when I first was researching the Enneagram, I would pick something because I thought I need to assert my, I do have an opinion and let me say it. And sometimes in the beginning, I think I felt I would assert something and then think, I don't really care about that. So, but I think it's important to just think about your motivation for it. And really, it doesn't matter whether you go to Del Taco or Taco Bell. It might not. But if you do have an opinion, you can state it, even if there's a little conflict. And I think sitting with conflict conflict isn't always a bad thing. And that's something that I'm learning.
Yeah. But it doesn't have to be mean. It can be
Mm-mm.
respectful. And so that's as a nine, it always, or and a seven, truthfully, it always feels like it's mean and hurtful and all of that. But it can be, okay, this is going to be hard, but let's have this hard conversation. And I think
Mhm.
God actually called me to two very hard conversations recently, to where I just dreaded going into it. But I
Oh.
was like, God, you are calling me to do this. You're going to give me the strength to get through it. And he did. And it was horrible. And one of them I cried through. The other one I had complete peace when I cried through. And I was just like, but I was obedient. And I know coming out the other side, God was like, okay, like I wanted that for you for growth. I don't care what happened with the
Mhm.
other person. Like I needed you to do that for you. Um,
Mhm.
so circling back around to
Mhm.
typing, um, you can't help but type people
Mm-hmm.
sometimes, but it also helps you give grace, right? Like if they're unwilling to walk the road to figure out their number, uh,
Mm-hmm.
if you can view them in that light and give them grace for certain things, just likewise, if you know someone, already know their number, you can just give them grace. And this is the thing that I learned. When people make decisions, it's not a direct affront to you, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're making decisions because that's the lens they see the world through.
Mm.
And so just keeping that in mind when someone makes a decision, I'm like, why on earth would they do that? That is,
That doesn't make any sense.
it doesn't make any sense. And they're just trying to offend me and they're this and they're that. The reality is they're not. They're just living their life in their world. And it's helped me give grace to a lot of people to understand like they're looking at this completely different than me.
And that has helped me as well. And I think that's, and that's the answer I usually give when I hear people kind of say, well, but it puts you in a box. And I mean, I think really it's helped me to give grace to people. And it's helped me to understand not everybody looks at the world the same way. And of course, for me as a 9, it's a lot easier for me to see multiple different perspectives. And that was another thing because I always have had that ability to do that to a certain extent, unless somebody is being mean and then, or I feel it's mean, and then I can be reluctant against it. But once I started researching the 9 and seeing how that is, it made me understand that, okay, if I can see why somebody else is seeing something a certain way, I could help diffuse the situation versus add to the stress.
Mhm.
Or even, I feel like the enemy wants us to all be at odds with each other. And I feel ultimately like the Enneagram really kind of is a way that we can all but be bound together in unity if we use it right.
Yeah. And understand people so we can give them grace.
Yes, exactly. That is
Yeah.
awesome. So we're kind of getting close to the end here. Is there anything else you want to add about the Enneagram or your book or anything that you thought of that you want people to know?
The only thing I would say is again, just reach out. If you're struggling finding your number, please reach out.
Mhm.
If any random name that comes up, I again get so excited. Being a 7, I get excited to help people. And so I know there are some of you numbers that are like, I would never, ever, ever reach out. And so I'm encouraging you if you have that
A
thought.
4.
Yes, a 4 would be like, nope, never going to reach out. Um, and likewise, if you already know your Enneagram number, if you could take my quiz to tell me that it's on point or not. And one of the things I will say is it'll give you the top 3.
Mhm.
And I did that for a reason. I don't just want the top number because sometimes, like Caroline as a 9, sometimes her 1 wing could come out really strong and she could be a 1 on a quiz. You know,
Mhm.
it just kind of depends on your personality in the day. And so
Mhm.
as you take the quiz, take your top 3 and research those because no quiz is ever going to get you 100% right 100% of the time.
Right.
Um, and if you already know your number, I'd love just to hear your feedback. If
Mhm.
you know your number, did I get it right? So,
Mhm.
and I just encourage you, use the Enneagram as a way to grow because it is such a fun tool and
Mhm.
I've just loved it. So,
I love it too. I think it's so awesome. When you wrote me and when I realized you were doing Enneagram stuff and I was like, hey, I've been researching this too. This is fun. So be like geeking out on the Enneagram together. I love it. All right. That was awesome conversation. I feel like there's so much to learn, and I would definitely recommend jumping in on Mica's group, get her book when it comes out, learn more about it because our conversation kind of just gives you the overview of things. And, we talked about wings and the arrows, which is what you lean towards when you're positive or negative, sometimes the other numbers that you go towards. So those are all things that kind of seem overwhelming, but as you read more about it, and even if you just read descriptions, it might help you. You might do the test and then find as you read the descriptions, and like Mica said, she's different, leans into different number for work versus personal for her wings. So that's another aspect to look at, and the motivations and all of it. So so I would definitely recommend all of that. I am going to jump into our rapid fire questions. Okay, what is your favorite vacation place? Where did you go and why?
So for our honeymoon, we went to the Cook Islands and absolutely loved it. It's the only time I've been on a vacation that I like fully relaxed. Because normally like I've gone to like Paris and it's like, okay, you got to see this, 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 and this. This was a tiny little island that we just relaxed, and that was my absolute favorite.
Which is so cool and interesting, because being a 7, I know on vacation, my husband, one of the things that we do on vacation that we kind of do give and take with each other, because he really likes to go, go, go. And I really like to, I love the like relax and the peaceful. And now we've learned to both enjoy each other's things at different times, but they're, you know, we go on, we love cruising. And I like to sit on the little deck chairs that are on the running level, and you just look out at the ocean, and they're these beautiful vintagey looking wood chairs. And I love just sitting there next to my husband for 20 minutes, an hour. I would sit for longer, and he'll sit with me, and then he'll say, "Are we done sitting yet? Are we done?" And I'm like, not yet. He's like, "Okay, that's fine. Okay, are we done yet? Are we done sitting yet?" It's like, let's go take a class. Let's go, you know. So that's interesting that that was your favorite, being a 7, that it was actually a relaxing one.
Yep.
What is your favorite scripture and why?
Jeremiah 29:11. It's been for all of forever. I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, give you a hope and a future. And why is just, I've always known he's had the future in his hands, and that he's planned a really good, fun life for me. There's my 7 coming out, right? Like, he's given me a purpose, and it's a fun one, right? He's really fun stories between my marriage and between my kiddos, and it's just been that promise that it's just sunk deep. Always.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And I love in that scripture too, that it was said to the Israelites when they were in captivity, because it was like God was giving them something to hold on to, even though it might not be what they initially thought, but he was promising that it was going to be good. And I love, like, I feel like so many people, some people like to use it like a genie, you know, oh, if I say this, God will just give me everything I want. But I think that it was definitely, I love the context of it, and I love your view on it. That's awesome.
Yeah.
What is your favorite TV show or movie?
So I probably have not watched TV definitely in the 4 years since I've had a child.
Okay.
Before that, I mean, from growing up, Top Gun, I had a
Awesome.
crush on Tom Cruise until I realized he's not a bit shorter than me.
He's like, Mike, tell them how tall you are.
I'm 6'2".
She's tall. I'm going to post. So I will post on Instagram the photo from our last get together. And you'll see, in comparison to me, I'm 5'6". So you'll see how tall Micah is.
He's what, 5'7"? So when I realized that difference, I was like, he's out. So
yeah, that's awesome. We actually just watched Top Gun the other night.
So funny.
Yeah, it came on and it was like to record. So my husband recorded it and we watched it the other night. So, and there is a new one coming out. Do you know that?
No, that'll be fun. Maybe I'll break my.
Yeah, and I don't think it's the same exact story. I think it's continuation. Tom Cruise is in it.
So funny.
Yeah, I don't know when it's coming out. Obviously, 2020 was weird with movies and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But so is there any other recommendations you have, or any other things you're liking, loving, that you want to share? Resources?
I was thinking about this because you had me think about this, and I'm like, I don't buy anything, right? So like, buying wise, I don't buy anything because we're just very like minimalist and all that. But I was using, this is a funny recommendation, but beeswax wraps instead of saran wrap.
Oh, cool.
And I was like, I love these. And when I read that, I was like, I'm gonna recommend that.
That's awesome. Okay, and I'll link them. I don't know, you can probably link them on Amazon or online or something, I'll find a link for him.
Yeah.
That's awesome. And I will definitely link all of Mica's where you can, why don't you tell everybody where they can find and follow you, and I'll link it in the show notes.
Yeah, Facebook and Instagram is just my name, Mica Kucera. So, I mean, you'll see it in all the everything. Micakucera. And then I have websites and all that linked to everything. So it's super easy. Once you're either find me on Instagram or Facebook, it's easy to find all of my stuff.
Okay.
Right now, and I'm sure by when this airs, I have a 21-day abiding with God course, which is according to your Enneagram type. So it's how do you,
cool.
it's how do you draw closer to God? But again, according to your Enneagram type. And then I have my group, and then my book will be coming out soon. So those are kind of the three things that God's like, Mica, only focus on these right now. Don't have your other ideas yet. So.
That's awesome. I will definitely link all of those things. And of course, as soon as we find out about your book launch date, we will link that too. And I am praying and hope that we know by the time this airs. So that would be awesome. Well, thank you so much, friend, for being on my show. I am just so grateful to have you. I love your heart for God, for your hubby, for your babies, and for your friends. And just your zeal for life has always been lovely to me. You've always been my friend. So, so thank you so much. Okay, all you housewives, that's it for today. I'm truly grateful you joined us. If you know anyone who would be encouraged by this episode, you can easily share it by taking a screenshot and adding it to your stories or feed. You can also text it to a friend. New episodes are uploaded every other Friday. Be sure to subscribe so you can catch them all. You can find and interact with me on Facebook and Instagram at Married Rogers Neighborhood, as well as my website, which I linked in the show notes. If you enjoyed our conversation today, it helps so much if you could take a second to rate and give a 5-star review. It really makes a huge difference for me and the podcast. Just remember, we are in this together. God loves you, and you are not alone. See you next time.